Councillor Byrne.
We're going.
We are going to start the meeting now. There we go. So, good morning. Good morning. This is the planning meeting of the Thursday, the 13th of April, and it's the last meeting of this administration. So I thought just before we do the item one, I would like to firstly give a great thanks to our Democratic Services Officer, Julie Holland, because she sits there and works extraordinarily hard during the meeting and also before the meeting and after the meeting, silently managing sometimes quite complicated situations, does so without complaining, very efficiently. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the committee for all your work. So thank you, Julie. Thank you. Certainly also to thank all the officers who've presented time and time again, and for the work that goes before that and the work during the meeting. I'm sure they find managing the committee a challenge most of the time. So, so thank you very much for that as well. And lastly, but not least, to all the members too, who some who have served on the committee who aren't here, and those who are on the committee, and those who are reserves as well to step in, because it's very time-consuming, the planning committee. There is a lot of reading to be done. There is often pre-meetings to go to. There is the site visits. So all in all, it's probably one of the most time-intensive committees of the authority. And so just to thank everyone for that enormous time and effort that's been put in, and hopefully we'll see most of us back after May. Councillor Projek.
Shall we all echo what you've said, Chair, on thanking our officers particularly, and members? I mean, members put in a huge amount of time. And I remember we did a briefing for potential councillors and said, if you don't like reading, don't go on planning. And so it is a hugely consuming task. I would like to say, though, to thank and appreciate Councillor Vinehall for chairing this, because there have been some tricky meetings. And actually, if you'd listed what Councillor Vinehall has achieved through the 4 years in opening up the planning committee, giving parish councils a seat on it, hugely, hugely different now to what it is. And congratulations for... And SIL as well, mustn't forget the improvements to the SIL, making it open and accountable. So thank you for that leadership.
Thank you very much. I do very much appreciate that, and have enjoyed every minute of that too. I think every minute. So there we go. So let's start the formal proceedings. First, we have the minutes from the previous meeting of the 23rd of March. Could I have authorisation to approve those?
So moved.
Thank you very much. We have some apologies. Julie, would you like to just run through those?
Yes, so we've got apologies from Councillors Curtis, Errington, Harmer and Norton. Councillor John Barnes is standing in as substitute for Councillor Curtis, and Councillor Mrs Cook is standing in as substitute for Councillor Norton.
Thank you very much. I don't believe we have any additional items. And going on to item 4, we have the one withdrawn item, which is the item 10. That's Westfield Down RR 2022/2935/P, which everyone's been advised about. Could we have... I'm not sure. Could we have disclosures of interest, please? I believe we have some. Is Councillor Mailey first?
Yes, Chair. Item 9, personal and prejudicial.
Thank you very much. Ray? Apparently you need to explain.
My apologies. As a member and also a membership secretary of Bexhill Heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gray?
I have exactly the same interest to declare. I am a member of Bexhill Heritage.
Thank you very much.
I don't know whether I should also mention, as regards the Beeching Road, item 8, I live in Colebrook Road, which is the road behind Beeching Road. My house doesn't back onto this. I have checked with Lisa and Julie. They don't think I need to declare an interest, but I just thought I would mention it. because you can actually see the plot of my house on the map, but it's further along.
Well, thank you. Noted for that. Councillor Drayson.
Similar for item 9, a member of Bexhill Heritage.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Byrne.
Similarly, member of Bexhill Heritage, and of course the bandstand is in my ward.
All right. Thank you very much. So is that that is also personal prejudicial? Okay. All right. Well, you'll need to redeclare before that item. And so the plan index you can see, and the first application is number RR 2023/57/T, which is 7 Andir Ida Court, and I think Sarah Shepherd is handling this. Sarah, over to you.
Sorry. Yes, members visited the site on Tuesday following the deferral from the March Committee to look at the trees under question with the application. And, oh, sorry, I'm not quite sure what's going on here today. Right, there we go. The opening. There's the aerial photograph. Members may recall that we parked in the car park here, and we walked down to look at the Scots pine and an oak tree in this area, and then we walked around to look at a couple of trees here and a couple around the back of Anderida Court, and that being, that's Anderida and that's Glyne Court there. The trees we looked at in front of Worsham Court were the 2 pine trees at 181 and 180. It was noted that they are quite close to the block of flats there, and that they are on an elevated embankment. It was also noted that the roots from those trees are beginning to damage the footway and also the parking court to the front here as well. There were signs of the roots raising the tarmac there. While the pines do have amenity value, and that was agreed by the tree officer at the visit, there is a public safety concern, and there is also the potential for claims against the council if removal of those trees is refused. If refused, however, as discussed on site, replanting of 2 other native species trees within the site would be a condition, and the applicants have already agreed that that is what they would do, and they've already been discussing with the tree officer those types of trees. He mentioned hornbeams to you on site, so we did look at that. The other thing to note here is that T183 is circled and mentioned in the report, but it's actually T179, the oak tree that got that one bough to be trimmed up that you looked at. The other trees were higher up. We walked up the driveway and then walked around here. There was various bits. You could see some tree works, just branches coming off and some trimming of canopies in that area and round the back here as well of Glyne Court. There's a photograph there illustrating some of the branches that were overhanging the footway and overhanging towards the building. The works to the trees were noted but are considered to be acceptable, and they would allow regrowth of those trees and those positions, so the works are not considered to be harmful to the long-term health and safety of those trees. The recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions. It should be noted in the recommendation that the works to grant consent... Sorry, there is one oak tree that they wanted to cut back, which we're disagreeing with. So that is noted there. So this is a split decision. The grant consent should be for the removal, for the works of those trees. And the last point, this is looking at the last point of the report, it should be T179 oak, reduction of canopy by up to 2 metres. Condition 1 and Condition 3 are actually notes. Condition 2, all works to be in accordance with the BSA standards, as is usual. And Condition 4 is the added condition for removal of T180 and 181, subject to substantial native trees being planted elsewhere within the site, and this condition is a bit missing off of it. The species and siting to be submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority to make sure that we do maintain tree canopy and biodiversity of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Comments? Councillor Mary Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a feeling that pine trees do tend to spread their roots in a shallow but wide sort of arc. And therefore, I just wonder whether it is actually advisable to suggest that we don't go for replacement with pine trees. Just a thought.
I think the replacements with hornbeam.
Hornbeam. Yeah, the proposal by the tree officer is to use hornbeams.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. It's the loss of these Scots pines that's really grieving me. They are the largest and longest lived tree, the only native pine in the UK. I know I'm on a losing battle here, but they are described as a keystone species in the ecosystem, forming the backbone on which other species depend. These trees are at least 70 years old, if not older. They were there long before that housing development was put there. It's an absolute crime that the houses and the car park were built so close. And all I would say is I hope they will take good advice on where to plant the 2 hornbeams, which do grow into large trees, and that some people won't be back here in 50 years' time having to take those trees down. We must take more care because... Sorry? No, nor will I. Long after we're gone. But the trees, these trees, Scots pines live for 700 years. So what's the point of having tree protection orders? We've got to be careful where we build.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Barnes, then.
Yes, I've some sympathy with Councillor Gray. It would be a shame if those pines were not replaced in some way by pines somewhere in this area. It is now becoming a very rare tree. I don't think this is the right place for them. It's too close to the building. Whether the building should have been allowed in that form is immaterial. It's there, and I think we've got to recognise that it's there. But I would like to see us make some endeavour to replace the pines somewhere on the site.
Councillor Prochak.
Thank you. I think you share what has been said about these trees. They're beautiful, as well as being special and unique, fairly unique. What I would like to have seen in the report, and perhaps there are lessons here, is a full biodiversity assessment of what's being lost and what should be gained and what should be replaced. That would have been... I think we can do this now. And there are lessons, aren't there? Because this site is lovely. And they've retained a lot of very, very lovely trees. And it must be a pleasure to have that in the middle of Bexhill like that. And to live there, it must be amazing with the many trees that are left. But the lesson about where to build something in proximity to trees, because they've got a TPO on them, and so they should have been looked at as where you build in close to them. So I think there's a big lesson here, particularly as things are moving towards biodiversity gain.
Yes, Councillor Mear.
Chair, yes. It's the pines again. A couple of observations. The first one was that the report says that the pines are in poor condition. I'm not quite sure that that's what the officer was saying on the day when we went on the visit. So I don't think that's.
I think the issue is the councillor's concerned that if they refuse permission, that the ground will continue to break up underneath.
Yes.
Somebody could trip over and we would be liable. I think that's the heart of the matter.
Yeah, and that was going to be another observation, that within 50 yards of where I live, there are not dissimilar trees which are causing the pavement to lift, which I have reported to the Highways Department at East Sussex County Council, and they say that it's perfectly all right and they were not going to do anything about it. So I don't know that the time has come when we can really say that that is a danger at the moment. The other point is the financial aspect of whether we as a council should be saying, here is a protected tree, it's a very fine tree, it's in good condition, but then if we refuse, there might be a financial liability. I mean, how much do we want to have these tree preservation orders if we're not prepared to pay a modest amount for resurfacing a path? Then we will lose trees left, right and centre. I'm very concerned about that.
Sarah Shepherd just wants to respond to that, and then I'll come to you.
Sorry, could I respond to 2 points? One to your first query, Councillor Pochak, about biodiversity report. That's not something that we would normally expect on a TPO works application. The TPO is just considering that particular tree, whether the works to that tree are acceptable or not, in pure tree health terms and safety terms. Turning to your point, Councillor Mear, if something happens as a result of highway trees, then it's the county council that's liable. In this situation, we are determining an application to remove a tree. If we refuse that removal, then we then become liable for any subsequent branches falling off, for the tree falling over. It was explained to us on site that the other day when it was windy, people standing on that path could feel the earth moving beneath them where the trees were moving on the bank. So we're not talking about resurfacing the pavement, we're talking about the potential for those trees to fall over on the building or for the roots to lift to such a degree that you've got substantial works to the pavement, to the parking area as well as people who may fall over them or whatever. So there is an issue about compensation from the council for far more than just resurfacing the footpath. And I think we do need to be mindful of that, given that we don't have a lot of money like any other council.
Councillor Madeley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a more of a general question, but do we have a date scenario when it comes to TPOs? For example, which came first in this particular development, the TPO or the housing? I would quite like to know if you do keep dates relating to TPOs. It could have been the TPO there before the property was built, and therefore this is something we should consider in the future. Thank you.
Yes, we do keep records of TPOs. The TPOs themselves are dated, so you know when they're from. This TPO dates from around the same time as the development. As you'll quite often be aware, we get requests for new TPOs when we have applications for development because the trees are deemed at risk. As you say, this is quite an old TPO now. The properties are going back to the 70s, 80s there. So, and we have come a long way, as Councillor Prochak mentioned earlier, about considering relationships of new buildings and trees. That's something that there is a lot more consideration given to nowadays because of the issues that then arise later in time with applicants, residents requesting works to TPO trees. So that is something that is more carefully considered nowadays, yeah.
Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I'm a little worried, and maybe this is something to be looked at when we do the new local plan. If we're simply regarding TPOs in relationship to individual trees, because sometimes the importance actually is a grouping of trees. And so I think there needs to be some consideration of historic landscape where you want to keep a grouping of a tree, not simply the individual trees. That said, Sarah didn't answer my point on would it be possible to replace these with the relevant pine elsewhere on the site rather than with hornbeam, because it seems to me a pity if we lost the link with pines altogether.
Sarah?
I have made note of that request, and I will discuss that with the tree officer as part of the condition and discussions with the applicant. I mean, they have agreed a hornbeam, but if there is an option to do Scots pine, if it's considered suitable soils and things there to do that and location, then yes, that's something we can ask for.
That's a project.
If I may, Chair, I just wanted to flag up, and Councillor Gray knows far more about it than I do. We've had a study done of tree cover in Bexhill and in the rural areas. Rural areas, adequate tree cover. Bexhill, very much not adequate tree cover. And I know many people have been planting, including Councillor Gray, thousands of trees to rectify this, but it's a report that's a very useful report for us in future applications. Thank you.
I have a question, just sorry, before Terry, for Sarah. If you have a TPO, Sarah, the objective is to protect the tree. And if the ground is being heaved underneath, or, you know, that tarmac's coming up, isn't that the responsibility of the owner of the property to sort out that problem as opposed to us to take down the tree? I mean, why do you have a TPO if you're not protecting the tree?
Well, the only option to preclude the heave is to remove the tree.
It is. I think, was it Councillor Byrne first and then Barnes?
Thanks, Chair. This is for my own education, or maybe other people's education. When we place a TPO on a tree, is it the tree as it is then, or is the life cycle of the tree taken into account? I'm thinking of trees that were fine where they are and then grow and grow and grow and encroach upon the foundations of a building or whatever. I don't think we've ever had something where the court has found in favour of the tree. So, you know, the tree's roots want to go under the house, we'll get rid of the house. So TPOs in general, do you look at the life cycle of the tree and take into account, when placing a TPO on a tree, what it's going to eventually, you know, mature into? Just out of curiosity, really.
Yes, they do look at the health and size of the tree at the time they do the TPO, and it's like the expectation of its growth and things. Mm-hmm. But as I say, we've come a long way in the last 30, 40 years in considering these matters, so something that we are looking at as being, you know, a very old TPO as such. Yes, all those sorts of things are taken into account now, yes.
In a current application, there would be a roof protection, which would mean that carport wasn't there. As simple as that. I mean, the root structure goes way beyond that carport. Councillor Barnes, yes, it was. Yeah.
Thank you, Jem. Just coming back to Councillor Prochak's point, the reason that I think that the rural area has a reasonable care of its trees is, of course, it is a responsibility of the parish councils. I know Etchingham has had a huge survey done, and we reacted to it with tree surgery. Wouldn't this therefore be one for the Town Council of Bexhill to be looking at?
Well, a planning application, they have to. The planning application has to come to us. I don't think they've made a comment, have they? Have they made a comment? They probably should too, although it's on private land, so it is on private land. I think I've got Councillor Drayson and then Councillor Gray.
Yeah, it was just to echo Councillor Barnes, really. When you look at this site, there are so many trees, and the owners are doing the best they can to maintain the trees. But going forward, we need to take a whole look at an area, not just a single tree, because it's silly to talk about a tree when there's so many there. It has to be how they relate to each other going forward.
Thank you. And Councillor Gray.
Just to add a couple of extra points. Firstly, these trees, in my view, are in very good condition. And I think Brian Griffiths agreed with me. The bark's very healthy. They've not lost any branches. There's no fungi growing around the base of them. So that's an indication they are in very good health. The root disturbance in the car park. Anyone that knows Bexhill well, we have tree-lined roads. And the pavements, and Richmond Road is an example, the pavements are quite treacherous and because of the tree roots. So every so often, the council just re-tarmac the pavement. Thank goodness they don't take the trees down. And thirdly, I would say that trees do move in the wind. If trees didn't move in the wind, they would snap. It's their way of coping with the force of the wind. But the winds we've had here have been about 32 miles per hour, have been about the strongest. It would take a 50 mile per hour wind at least to, cause some damage to a tree. So the movement of the tree, I think, is a natural way of the tree coping with the wind.
Thank you. I want to make a comment, but about another tree. I want to make a comment about T84, which is the oak, which is the one for refusal. And there was some discussion on site with the tree officer who actually agreed that it was getting in the way of the larger oak above it and could easily be reduced or taken down. Now, it's not a question for this application to remove it, but I could see a case for that actually being reduced to allow the other tree to prosper, the canopy of the tree above. And maybe we could make that decision, but ask them to add in another tree on the site to compensate, just in case there was an issue with it. Any comments on that?
Maybe take that tree down and leave the Scots pines.
Well, that's the case too. Yeah. Now, the point is about Scots pines is they tend to grow in groups and form a group canopy as opposed to single canopies. Any other comments or thoughts? And does anyone want to put forward some proposal? There's been some discussion on this matter now. A quiet room. Somebody needs to decide something.
I'm not sure the case has been made out, but the proximity to the houses is worrying. But the trees are healthy. There's no sign of them falling. It may be that this is a premature decision.
Yeah, so let's ask the officers, Sarah. That you can hear the commentary that's been made, and I think there's some concern that as Councillor Barnes said, it may be premature. I don't think a convincing case has been made. So where might we take that? There is a case on both sides for taking down and retaining.
The only other comment I would add is if you referring to those pine trees, they are on a bank. They're not on level ground. They're on a bank above. If you remember, you stepped down to go into the entrance to the flats, and the pines were at the top of the bank. We're not talking about them being on level land that's got even ground spread around it. You're talking about them, the roots that we could see moving were those on the higher level. The lower side of the tree obviously goes down a bank, and the roots are different there, aren't they? So if they're lifting on the higher level, given the height of those trees, if they start moving, then what's to support them the other side?
Because of the discussion that's been had, is there some further assessment that could be done on this matter? I mean, I know we have a tree officer and is a good chap, and we had a good discussion with him, but he acknowledged that they were healthy trees, that the issue was actually more about the potential risk of somebody having an accident on the footpaths below. It seems that it would be sad to take down these trees if there was another alternative. I mean, I'm asking you what further approach could be taken.
Sorry to come in here now, members. I mean, the application is before you. You have to determine what's before you. If you feel that you have sufficient reason, evidence to contradict what's been presented before you to refuse the removal of the pine trees, then it is within your powers to do so. However, you have to be mindful that if there is any form of failing or falling of that tree, then that could be compensation that could be against the council. And I just have to point your attention to what happened at the Augustas just recently, where the pine tree fell over, and that just more or less missed quite a few of the spectators. So it's just, the trees do grow in a very sort of long, lengthy way, that they do have that tendency to, because of the way they grow, so they do have that tendency to sort of lean and to cause sort of just kind of
the risk that's being pointed out is one of the paths underneath, I think, isn't it? The damage to the path could potentially being a trip hazard. Yeah, am I correct in that? Am I correct in that?
Well,
Yeah, that wasn't the only risk that was raised, was it? There is a risk of not only the movement in the pavement and that car park area, but the actual failing of the trees if, you know, in high winds and things because of their siting on that bank above the properties and the way that they have, you know, yes, we accept that they move, but obviously the tree officer has given us his advice, and while he doesn't disagree about their amenity value and their value, you know, as trees, there is a health and safety concern with them and a real concern about potential future compensation claims if we refuse the application.
And to be fair, it was an independent, or wasn't independent, but an archaeological report done as well on that. Councillor Cook, I think you wanted to say something, and Councillor Gordon.
Thank you. I'm only a substitute, so I don't know the rules precisely. Would it be possible for us to remove the pines from the proposal to grant permission to do so and review for a year? Could we measure movement? Could we look at how much the trees are moving in the high winds we've experienced recently? Could we look at the increased damage to the car park, which, you know, to my way of thinking, we shouldn't have car parks, you know, we should get away doing away with cars. But, you know, that is a good way for us to measure the damage that is being done. I mean, is that a possibility? And then review it in a year's time, perhaps?
Yeah, please, Kimmy, yeah.
My experience with that is that who's going to bear the cost of monitoring that? Because you will need to put some serious equipment on site, on land, to actually monitor the movement from that particular tree itself. And if the council is going to compensate the applicants or the landowners or the tree owners to do that, then by all means. But my last tree officer, the quote I got for something similar to that can run into hundreds of thousands of pounds.
That's really helpful, Kemi.
I've got Councillor Gordon and Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, Sarah did answer my question. I was going to ask a question on health and safety, whether it's a risk, and apparently there is a risk.
Yeah, Councillor Stevens.
Is there any way that if they resurface the path and maybe reinforce the trees some way, the other side, is that an option? Thank you.
Go on. Yeah.
If you are then resurfacing it, then you are likely to damage the health of the tree even further. So it's a catch there.
Yeah, Councillor Drayson, yeah.
It strikes me that the applicant is trying to do their own health and safety and asking for these trees to be removed. Although it talks about the damage to the path and the car park, the problem is the root upheaval and the fact that the roots are moving. And if we say no to him trying to exercise his health and safety, we do take on that responsibility because we've said no, where they don't lightly ask to take trees down. I mean, they've got 100 and some odd trees on this site, so it's not a frivolent request, it's a serious request to deal with the problem that they're having to live with.
So we have Councillor Prochak, and then we'll summarise.
A really good discussion, and Julie, I think we should be noting we need some training on TPOs and their effects, just to bring this up the agenda. I very reluctantly moved the recommendation with the amendments that have been mentioned already. Very, very reluctantly, given the having seen these beautiful trees, etc. Because we don't have resources to deal with the consequences. And has been pointed out, and even with Councillor Cook's idea, we just do not have these resources. And so I reluctantly moved the recommendation.
I would, yeah. Councillor
Chairman, I would very reluctantly second that to Councillor Prochak.
Would you accept my suggestion for T84 as well, with the addition of another tree? Well, we can. No? Not happy with that?
Well, we should only really be dealing with what the application is about. It's not for us it's not up to us to input something in the application.
No, but you can accept T84. You can accept T84. You don't have to refuse it, and condition an additional tree to be planted.
I meant to add, Chair, while you're thinking about that, what I meant to add is, in my experience, and there are people who do not like trees, they don't like the leaves, they don't like the trees. And if somebody wants to actually prove that a tree is not worthy of existence, they will do lots of awful things to make sure they go. And and you're nodding around the table that this can happen. So that's why I think we should reluctantly.
Well, we have a proposer and a seconder, and I presume you're asking for the condition for the pines to be replaced by pines. Is that correct? So the amendments are for the pines to be replaced with pines. So I can take a vote on that. Those in favour of that? Yeah, go on.
Sorry.
So if
one at a time, please.
If you put in a condition that pines have got to be replaced by pines, what if there is nowhere suitable on that site for the pines? The condition at the moment says suitable native trees.
Well, the condition of species and site is to be agreed with a preference to pines, should that be an acceptable site. Councillor Barnes.
Trees.
Well, I think it is. I think it's within the condition sufficiently. I don't think there's going to be an objection to it by the applicant. I think we need to take a vote on that. So the proposal is as set down in the report. Those in favour of that motion? That's not unanimous. Thank you. Those against that motion? One. Thank you very much. So that motion is passed. Thank you very much for that. Now, we have the next two applications, and I always take the opportunity to remind everyone that these are applications on Rother land, and just a reminder that we are acting as the planning authority, not as district councillors in this matter. So you need to think of the planning aspects, not as if you were in a full council meeting or making a decision as a councillor. You're making a decision as the planning authority, and Sarah's going to take the first one, which is Beeching Road, and that's 2023/328/P. Sarah.
Right, good morning again. This is another site that the members visited on Tuesday morning. The location is within the industrial estate, as we noted. We drove into the parking area here, and you're able to review the unit here. There's additional parking here, and you'll note that, as mentioned by Councillor Gray earlier, Colebrook Road is to the western end here. The site is owned by the council, as just mentioned. The proposal is for a change of use of the unit to a brewery with a tap room, and with the addition of a small chiller unit with external fans to the front and rear. So that's the internal area of the building, and that's one of the fans there. As you can see, the tap room is the small area to the front, the brewery area more centrally located, and the cold store to the rear. And as I say, two small fans, one to the front and one to the rear. The proposal is considered acceptable in this location within the industrial estate and would not harm local amenity. As recommended by Environmental Health, conditions are proposed with regards to limiting noise and customer hours, along with drainage and refuse conditions. You'll see in the report that a mix of public objections and support, 5 of each, and some other comments have been noted, but those have been addressed in the report, and there are not considered to be reasons to refuse the application. The recommendation, as set out at the end of the report, is for approval subject to conditions.
Thank you. And we have Councillor Oliver here, I think, possibly wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
residents brought this to my attention over the bank holiday weekend, so that's the first indication I had that there was some concern from residents in Colebrook Road, and the main point was that they felt that there was not any planning notices appended to the Colebrook Road, which sort of backs onto the Beeching industrial area. They had raised some issues which I have brought to the attention of the planning officer with regards to, let me just check what we were looking at there. They were just really identifying no planning notices. Is that a material issue in any way? Hours for the tap room, that was perhaps a concern, and also soundproofing and the retention of existing mature trees. So, my purpose here is making absolutely certain that the residents' points were taken, and I believe that the planning officer has addressed those within the report. I really haven't got anything further to say on it. I do know the site, and I think it's an excellent opportunity for some regeneration of that particular site for the benefit of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Sarah, did you want to just cover off those points that Councillor Oliver raised? There's the issue of why wasn't a planning notice in Colebrook Road and trees. I'm not sure what the tree issue was. Yeah,
I'm not aware of issues about a lack of site notices. Site notices were put up at the site, so I'm afraid I'm unable to comment on that one. The proposals don't affect any trees. There are some odd trees along that western boundary, but there are to be no changes to that car parking area. That's already there, so the trees aren't to be affected. And yes, there are conditions about noise and hours of use as well. So they're covered in the conditions at the end of the report.
If I could just add a point, Chair. I believe it was on my alert, so there could well have been awareness of this that was going on, but I think it's because there was not a physical notice that people perhaps didn't look at my alerts.
No, thank you. Well, as we all know, they're put up outside the building as opposed to on the streets around. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Oliver, for those comments there. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I suspect there may not be an access onto that road and therefore no opportunity to display a pink notice. It is sometimes true that pink notices aren't always noticeable unless the local member or somebody else draws the attention of residents to it. That said, this seems to me a proposal that squarely falls within our policy. We've mentioned noise and hours of work. There is one point raised about possible air effect on air. Again, these are things that are best addressed through environmental health and condition rather than by refusing planning permission. I would be very happy to move planning permission.
We're moving the proposal, but we have a couple of people who'd like to speak. Councillor Drayson and then Councillor Ganley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a moment. I have to say I'm a member of Bexhill Town Council. I just want to say the report says there's no objection. I've often heard comments that the Town Council never seem to make comments. In fact, the letter says the Town Council supports this planning application. It did make a comment and it supports this application.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Ganley.
I second the recommendation, Chairman.
Right, we have a proposer and a seconder. Did anyone want to have further discussion on the matter? Councillor Madeley.
Yeah. Yes, I do have one concern, Chairman, and that's the tap room element. When this entire area and the building itself, which as we all know is split up into various elements, but the basis for it is creative. Now, I don't have objection to them having a brewery on the site, but I do query the tap room element because I feel that it's taking it away, not necessarily detrimentally to the area, but I just wonder how many more people could change what they're doing within the site, which opens it up. Well, if you can have a tap room here, you can have X, Y, and Z, which then moves away from the creative side of the particular, the entire site. Thank you.
Perhaps the officer could answer that. I mean, is there any conditions relating to it being a creative centre as opposed to the desire by the council itself?
I mean, this is an industrial site, so a brewery would be acceptable in the area. I think you're straying into decisions made by other departments and sections within the council outside of planning. We're looking at purely whether the planning use is acceptable in the area or not, and it is considered to be acceptable. And this is a small, for want of a better word, craft beer company. And it's not unusual for them to nowadays have a small tap room area to try and promote and sell their products to increase their business. I mean, anybody else that came along for any other change of use would similarly need to apply for planning permission, and we'd have to consider them at that time as to what they were proposing and whether it was suitable or not.
Because I think it's the tap room element, which to me could easily be turned into a pub rather than just a tasting area. That's my concern.
I mean, licensing will deal with the nature of what goes on there, which is obviously a separate thing. But the tap room is for use in association with the brewery, so it wouldn't generally fall within that use class for it being a pub, because it's an ancillary use to the main use as the brewery.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
Oh, just very briefly, as a resident of Colbrook Road, this was shown on my alerts. Councillor Oliver is right. And I've just only had 2 comments locally. One was, as Councillor Madeley has said, concerns about the taproom element and that it might turn into a pub. But I think that's covered in the conditions. The other comment was very positive. Very pleased that these units are being used. And, yes, just very positive.
And perhaps finally, Councillor Drayson.
It's really been said, it's a matter for licensing to make sure it doesn't open beyond the operating hours of, I mean, it could be shop hours, couldn't it, for people doing visits.
Okay. We have a proposer and a seconder. I'll take a vote on this now, unless there's anyone desperate to speak. Those in favour? And I believe that is a unanimous vote. All right, thank you very much. Now we have the next item, which is the shelter, and there were 3 declarations of interest on this. 4 declarations.
You will have to leave the room.
Advised to leave the room, Chair.
Do you want to all just redeclare first? Do it officially.
Redeclaration. Councillor Madeley.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to.
Terry. Just redeclare quickly. Councillor Madeley.
I wish to redeclare. Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
I wish to redeclare as a member of Bexhill Heritage.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drayson.
Declared member of Bexhill Heritage.
Councillor Byrne. Thank you very much. And we have James Layback here to present. Thank you very much. Nice to see you here today.
Thank you for having me. So, as you're aware, members visited this site on Tuesday, and not up yet. Members visited this site on Tuesday. The application relates to a Grade 2 listed seafront shelter, which is owned by Rother District Council and located on the south side of Delaware Parade. In recent years, the shelter has been the subject of a restoration programme carried out by local community group Bexhill Heritage with support from Rother District Council. The proposals themselves are to attach 1 external and 10 smaller internal plaques to commemorate the opening of the shelter and the locals who have contributed to the cost of the shelter refurbishment. There have been no objections to the proposals received. The works are considered to have a net negligible impact on the listed structure, and therefore the recommendation is to grant listed building consent subject to conditions.
Thank you very much, James. Any comments or questions on this application? Yes. Yes.
Not totally relevant, I know, Chair, but I just want to congratulate Rother and also the Bexhill Heritage, who've worked together on this. Bexhill Heritage providing huge amount of expertise and volunteer time. Extraordinary. I mean, and also Rother have worked very hard on this because they had to replace some of the rotting interior and go through our wonderful procurement processes. So I think it's congratulations all round for this. And I think I didn't attend, but saw a wonderful opening of the bandstand. I think it's a brilliant structure.
Any other comments? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I would have thought that this is actually adding to the historic nature of the building rather than detracting from it. It is in effect commemorating what is an important part of the history of the bandstand. My only question, I suppose, is whether the appropriate material has been chosen given the sea air. But that I'm not qualified to speak on. I'm not a metallurgist.
Stainless steel.
Yeah, stainless steel may be the right material, but I certainly have no objection in principle. And if everybody else is satisfied that it's the right metal, then that's fine by me.
Councillor Ganley.
I move the recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. We have a mover in Councillor Ganley and a seconder in Councillor Prochak. I'll take that. All those in favour, please raise hands. And that is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, James. It's probably one of the shortest presentations and applications ever done, but we still thank you for coming anyway. Nice to see you on something other than a screen. Thanks, Kirsty. Welcome back. You'd be pleased to know that that was approved as members of the Bexhill Heritage Centre. Good, yes. So we're going to move on to the appeals item on the agenda. Councillor Byrne. We're moving on to the appeals item on the agenda, item 11. Does anyone have any questions on appeals for the officers? I think the number of appeals is reducing slowly over time. Councillor Ganley.
I'm shocked, rather, to see the first appeal, change of use of redundant golf club house. That would seem to suggest that Battle Golf Club, the golf course, is closed. Does anybody know if that's the case?
Yeah.
It is?
It's been closed for a long time.
Is it?
The one on
We've
Netherfield.
removed the brown sign now.
Well, I used to enjoy climbing up and down that steep hill there. There's a hole, just to explain, Chairman. There's a hole there where you hit your ball straight ahead, and the slope takes it down there. Wherever you hit the ball, it ends up down at the bottom of the slope. But anyway, that's beside the point. Thank you, Chairman, for your time.
Very much. Councillor Drayson, you've got a question there.
So it's not on this list, but I was just pleased to note this week that the appeal was dismissed again about Collington Park Crescent and building on the bit of open land there. It's been rejected for the second time. Appeal.
Thank you for that. So, Barnes, did you have a question on appeals?
Yes, I've learnt that the Bantam Farm appeal has been turned down, but we don't seem to have been circularised on that. But there are still outstanding appeals against enforcement, and I just wonder how long this can go on. This must be about the 14th or 15th appeal that this man has had.
I shall let the officers respond to that.
If you've seen an appeal decision, I haven't. So I don't know when that was released.
It's on the portal, apparently.
Oh, well, that must have only just come in yesterday or today then, because it hasn't been circulated to us yet.
Right.
As far as the enforcement appeal, that's still with PINS. We still don't have a date for the hearing for that. We suspect they may be waiting the outcome of the planning hearings that I did earlier in the year before they proceed with the enforcement hearing. But that is with PINS, and we're beholden to PINS on that one.
Yeah.
So, but any new appeals that come out, Councillor Dyson, you just mentioned the Collington one. That's only just come in as well, so that will be on the next committee list as well.
Other questions on appeals? Yes, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I may have been chatting about something else when you discussed it. The new 5G telecommunication mast on Cumberland Court is causing all sorts of grief in my area, and it seems to have dimensions that weren't previously discussed, in that some of the tenants are now saying that the roofing structure is not adequate. It's only just adequate for what's there at the moment, let alone anything else. So it becomes a safety issue rather than a planning of rather than whether the equipment is too high, too low, or whatever.
I'm not aware of the case you're talking about. However, if it's one that's come through under the GDPO, then it is, if it's within the criteria that is permitted, then we really wouldn't have any way to get them to make any changes to it, unless they go outside of the scope. Then they would need the prior notification to be submitted to us.
It did seem that there was no consideration necessarily of the condition of the roof, because equipment was already there. And
so it's a replacement.
Well, it wasn't so much replace as it's replace and slightly more equipment. I remember it coming to committee, and as such, it didn't look like a problem. But like all these things, the closer it gets to the implementation...
The 5G mast didn't come to committee. The 5G mast didn't come to committee. It's they come under... I've actually got Miles with his hand up here. I'll get Miles because he does know about this application. And so, Miles, I see you lurking there in the background. Would you like to come on screen?
Yeah, here I am. Hello, councillors. Just want to say on this, it was a notification under the Electric Communications, the Code of Operators regs, and they were saying it was permitted development. Now, it's a notification only, so we would only look at the information they have and give a, an opinion on that, whether it's prior approvals required or not. Now, the thing is, there is some dispute about this, about whether it is permitted development or not. It has caused a lot of local concern, but at the moment there is no installation. It is intended for next week, but at the moment there is no decision and no breach, and therefore there's nothing we can do. Now, I will be arranging a call with legal as well, just to discuss this more fully, because one thing members have to be aware of is that this is a freeholder and a lessee issue, a health and safety issue, I think, and then beyond that it's a planning issue potentially. But at the moment, we think it is permitted development. And we have had a long history of telecommunications on the roof of this particular block of flats. So at the moment, I would say, that is in hand. That is all we can say and advise at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Miles. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Miles. I've had 2 long phone calls about this, and the problem seemed to be that it got totally entangled. There were the no 5G protesters who didn't put up a credible case about anything. There were some people who said, I think my ceiling is damp because of the equipment that's already there on the roof. and there was a property company, the property management company, that was only engaged 6 months ago, which really hasn't done anything to look at the roof at all. And my conversation was with the lady who used to manage the building, but had found it all too much for her, hence the property company taking over. So there seemed to be a whole entanglement. But taking out the planning issue, I understand what you say completely, but I hope it's not seen as a fait accompli that it's going to go ahead, because there are real safety issues. And I seem to recall the outline, the silhouette of the equipment being on the drawing, but not necessarily the weight. I don't know whether the...
It's not a planning consideration. It's not a planning consideration.
So if you put something on a roof, it's not a planning consideration, the weight of what you're going to put on there?
It's a building control issue.
Yeah, okay.
You get planning permission for something, but if you can't actually do it, then you can't do it.
Yeah, but I assume the other implications are being handled by the relevant departments.
Well, I presume so, yes. Yeah. Good. Well, that would come after the planning commission anyway. Yes, Councillor Madeley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask through you to Miles? Am I right in thinking that the original application was actually withdrawn, and now they've come back with an amended one, presumably a slightly shorter, lighter aerial or something or other?
Well, I mean, there's a long history of these applications going back many years. For some have been full applications, some prior approvals, and some have been merely notifications, depending on what they intend to put up. And of course, depending on how permitted development rights have modified over time with regard to telecommunications equipment. So this particular one was notification only because it was under the understanding it was permitted development based on the information provided. So the issue would be if they installed it and it was found that actually that wasn't the case, then potentially there is a planning angle there. But bear in mind, this would need to be weighed up against all matters, which would include, past planning history and what's on the roof. The health and safety and that issue is not a planning matter, and it wouldn't be something considered as a planning application in any case, even if full planning permission was required. So, this is notification only. There's some which would require prior approval, some telecommunications, but that's only on things limited to things like siting, and then others would need full plan permission. But bear in mind, when you consider that and you consider the history, it is complex. We are dealing often with degrees, even what is an antenna or isn't an antenna in terms of things like that. So again, we do need to talk with legal about this. As it stands, what they propose to put on there hasn't been put on yet. And what they propose, they are of the opinion it's permitted development. Now, if it is permitted development, we cannot take action.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And I think that just brings a point for future training. A future training session on prior notification and similar applications would be very useful, because I think that they sort of tend to slip. They're not noticed because they are notifications. Councillor Barnes.
I'm not expecting an answer this morning, but I'd be grateful if Sarah would tell me now the Etchingham one has started. Because I think if it were to be a hearing, the parish council would want to be in support of the council and appear at that hearing. This is the RR 2021 12615P, which is says appeals started.
Or point noted. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Mary Barnes.
There are a couple in here which begin with application to determine if prior approval is required. Why would that be an appeal issue? why is it necessary to push? There are two. One is one of the Bexhill ones, change of use from offices to dwelling houses, and there's another one which is I think it was a block of flats or something. But one of it was just the wording: application to determine if prior approval is required. Why should that be in the appeals notices?
It's the way the prior approval process is set out under the legislation. So you do have the criteria. So you have the meter development from office to residential. However, you do need you need to submit a prior notification to the council, and the council can determine whether prior approval is required or not required. So, and the council has to take into account certain assessment within that prior notification application. So
I understand that, but what does that mean? That why should it come to be determined by an inspector?
The council has said
we probably refused.
Yeah, they've refused it.
We've refused it.
They've said it does need approval. Yeah, it does, as opposed to not needing approval, and there's disagreement. So they're going to appeal that decision. They're appealing this decision to refuse prior approval. Yeah. So they believe they can do this development without the need of an application. Yeah. And the council says, no, you need an application, so that's got to be determined, as opposed, they would prefer to do that than move ahead with an application. I think it's a similar sort of logic on that.
Yeah, I think this has just been refused for a second time, hasn't it? It's just been refused at appeal, hasn't it?
Okay. Any other comments or questions on appeals? In which case, for those who survive the rigours of re-election and join the planning committee in the next administration, the 30th of May is the date for the next planning bus.
Yeah, the committee's on the 1st, isn't it?
The committee is on the 1st, yes. And there will be training during the course of May, and I'll have a discussion with Kemi about that. Yes. Well, she has been in post since the 1st of May. Miles is in the background, as you can see on the screen, lurking in the background for some time, but no, Kemi is the go-to person. Good. Well, thank you very much.